Welcome to Good News Devos on U-Nite Radio. I'm Jaden. Hey friends, do you know what holiday is coming up this Sunday? On the count of 3, shout it out. 1, 2, 3. It's Easter! But before we celebrate Jesus' resurrection, there's another special day that we remember tomorrow. Do you know what that day is called? If you know it, whisper it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. If you said Good Friday, you're right. Good Friday is the day we remember how Jesus died on the cross. Have you ever wondered why we call it Good Friday? How can we call it good when it's a day to remember something awful that happened to Jesus? I'll give you a hint. We call it good because of something that happened on the cross while Jesus was dying for us. Listen closely to find out what it is. But before we talk about Jesus, we need to go back hundreds of years before Jesus came to earth. We need to go back all the way to ancient Egypt. The Israelites were quickly preparing to leave their homes. Can you pretend to pack your bags like you're about to go on a trip? Quickly, you don't have much time. Great job. Earlier, their leader, Moses, had warned them about the final plague that would come to Egypt. God had already sent 9 plagues. He had turned the river to blood, sent frogs and gnats to invade Egypt, and put all of Egypt in darkness. God was showing Egypt that he was the one true God. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, refused to free the Israelites from slavery. Even after 9 plagues, Pharaoh didn't budge. God warned Pharaoh that the last plague would be the worst. At midnight, the firstborn of every family and the firstborn of all the animals they owned would die. But Pharaoh still didn't listen. During all the plagues, God protected the Israelites. Now, the Israelites were obeying God's instructions so they would be protected from the final plague. To show they trusted God, each family took a 1-year-old lamb that was spotless, meaning it could have no spots in its wool, nor could it have any bruises or sores on its body. It had to be perfect. The family was to kill the lamb and put its blood on the sides and top of the door of their home. Anyone who trusted God and obeyed him by putting blood from a spotless lamb over the door, God would pass over. That meant God would see the lamb's blood as a substitute, dying in the place of the firstborn who lived there. God also said that they were to cook the lamb and eat it as they prepared to leave Egypt. This meal was called the Passover. God instructed the people to have a Passover celebration and meal every year as a reminder of what God did to free them. It was also a clue as to what the Savior of the world would do. That night, everything happened during the last plague as God said it would. The Israelites who obeyed God were safe. After the last plague, Pharaoh listened and he set the Israelites free. But where would they go? As they journeyed, God would lead them to a home he promised to them called the Promised Land. There, the Israelites would make their home and live as God wanted them to. As they traveled, God gave the Israelites instructions for how he wanted them to live. As part of those instructions, God chose a tribe from the people of Israel for a special job. The Israelites had 12 different tribes who were descended from a man named Jacob. God chose the tribe of Levi to serve him as priests. Priests were religious leaders and worship leaders for the Israelites. One of the biggest jobs God gave the priests was to make sacrifices for the people. Similar to how the Passover lamb was a substitute for the Israelites in Egypt, these sacrifices served as substitutes as well. But these sacrifices weren't necessary to escape a physical problem, like escaping Egypt. The sacrifices were for their sin. Sin is anything you think, say, or do that goes against God's instructions. Even though the Israelites were God's chosen people, they still sinned. They lied and cheated. They didn't give God the glory for the things he did, and they hurt each other. Everyone is born knowing how and wanting to sin. The Bible shows us how serious sin is in Romans 6:23. It says, "For the wages of sin is death." Wages are something earned, like a paycheck or even an allowance. When you, I, and the Israelites or anyone else sinned, we deserved death. But the death that comes from sin is worse than physical death. It means to be separated from God forever. He wanted to have a relationship with the Israelites, but their sin kept them apart from God. So he gave them priests to make sacrifices. If someone had sinned, they would bring a perfect lamb to the priest. The priest would follow God's instructions and sacrifice the lamb to God as a substitute for that person. The lamb shed its blood and died so others could live. The sacrifices showed the Israelites how serious sin is. For hundreds of years, this is what the Israelites did to restore their relationship with God. But these sacrifices weren't meant to be the permanent solution. They were a picture of what the Savior of the world would do. Now, we have to fast forward to when Jesus was on earth. It was time for the annual Passover celebration. Jesus and his 12 disciples were celebrating together. At this Passover meal, Jesus did something different. He used bread and wine to explain that his body would be sacrificed and his blood shed for the sins of the world. Jesus instructed his disciples to eat the bread and drink the wine to remember this. It wasn't until later that the disciples would truly understand what Jesus meant. That night, Jesus was arrested by his enemies.
Seize him!
They put him on trial and sentenced him to death. Soldiers placed a heavy wooden cross on Jesus' shoulders and made him carry it. People mocked him as his enemies led him through the narrow streets of Jerusalem. They stopped him at a hill called Golgotha outside the city. They placed Jesus on the cross and put large spikes in his hands and feet, nailing him to the cross. Jesus didn't deserve any of it because he is the perfect Son of God. But he willingly died because he is also the perfect sacrificial lamb. 1 Peter 1:18-19 says, "You were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot." The futile ways you and I inherited or got from our ancestors was sin. Our sin held us prisoner and kept us away from God. A price had to be paid in exchange for our return. Our sin against God is so serious that silver, gold, or other valuable things weren't enough to pay for it because those things don't last forever. Jesus' blood was that ransom. It was the sacrifice. After Jesus died, his friends and followers buried him. But while all the animal sacrifices stayed dead, Jesus didn't. On the third day, he was resurrected. He came back to life. Jesus' resurrection proved that he made the final sacrifice for sin. Jesus is still alive, living in heaven as King of the world. That's what makes Good Friday good. If you've believed in Jesus as your Savior, then you should take some time to remember what Jesus has done for you this Good Friday. Psalm 77:11 says, "I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old." God loved you despite your sin. He gave you a relationship with him that started the moment you believed and lasts forever. You don't have to make a sacrifice or rely on any leader to help you have a relationship with God because Jesus paid it all for you. These are the deeds of the Lord you can remember. Tomorrow, spend some quiet time with God to think about how much your life has changed because of what Jesus did for you. Think about all the ways God has changed you to be like him. As you think about these things, thank Jesus for being the perfect sacrificial lamb. But maybe you haven't believed in Jesus as your Savior. He wants you to know that He is the perfect sacrificial lamb. He willingly offered Himself as a sacrifice for your sin so you don't have to be separated from God. Ephesians 1:7 says, "In Him we have redemption through His blood." Redemption means that the price for your sin has been paid for through Jesus' sacrifice. You won't be held prisoner by sin anymore. You will be free to have a friendship with God forever. If you have never believed in Jesus, will you do that today? Thanks for tuning in to our Good Friday special on Good News Devos. We'll see you next time. Have a good Friday and a happy Easter.